Everyone in my family but the two had already had it, kind of way back.
Really?
But the family coffee.
The whole group, my whole group, I was with. In those groups, 7 of the 12 got it, 3 of them had it the previous month, so.
Recording in progress. Recording stopped.
That was creepy.
I asked her.
Oh, Dan, it's good to see you.
Good seeing you. How you doing?
We're here. We're hanging.
Yeah, I get to see Esther like most days twice a day.
Yes.
Yeah, drop off.
Oh, nice. Which game?
Yeah.
Nice. Good one.
Yeah.
How do you like your watch?
I like it. I have my dress watch.
I figured that.
So, me, that I have, of course. Second one. I broke when we were on vacation.
Some correspondence.
Good to have you on the side of me. Oh, I got it. Thank you.
Stay in college.
Make sure. What are you gonna do?
I think it's good.
Yes. It's good. Oh, thanks.
Yeah. So we're going to call the meeting of Tuesday, July 12th to order. And
Recording in progress.
first item is approval of the agenda. Seconded, there is amendment, addition, it's 3D, we're going to add it. Due to concerns about COVID, the Middlebury College has requested the board's approval of the addition of outside consumption permits in conjunction with the already approved first and third class licenses for Atwater's Common Dining Grill. So 3D would be approval of outside consumption permits for Middlebury College for Atwater Commons and the grill in conjunction with the board's prior approvals for first and third class liquor licenses for these facilities, and it's pending public safety. Are there any other changes or amendments that anybody would like to make? Okay.
I will be abstaining from the meeting minutes.
Okay, abstention from the meeting. I will point out, Chief Tom Hanley received the Outstanding Service Award, and for all those out there watching, kudos, congratulations, Tom. Okay, if there's nothing else for change, then all in favor of approving, the consent, I'm sorry, I went on the consent.
Yeah, you
So,
can
wait a
change it
second,
to it,
hold on,
and then,
I'm changing the
Changing
agenda.
the agenda, and now you need a motion.
So, no,
Well,
I didn't do a motion.
let's accept the agenda.
Right.
Yes, okay.
I meant motion.
So all in approval, all in favor of approving the amended agenda, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Yeah.
We have a motion.
Well, I thought we.
Can we start over?
Okay, you replay the tape.
Take it from the top.
I just said the agenda, not the consent agenda.
Yes, we just approved the agenda.
Okay, and then you added it.
The change to the agenda, adding it to the consent agenda in the regular agenda, there we go.
Now we're on the approval of the consent agenda.
Could be a long night.
Yes, I hope it is. Now, approval of the consent agenda is next.
Oh.
Second,
Okay. Well, the second is the amended consent agenda that we added. And we have a extension from the select board meeting minutes. Bernard was not there.
Also,
And we do congratulate Tom once again. So all in favor of approving the amended consent agenda, signify by saying aye. Those opposed? Okay, citizen comments. And how many are here for comments that are not otherwise covered? Okay, if we can keep it brief. I'll have you come up to the table, state your name.
My name is John McFarland. I live in 53 Washington Street. And passed out a 4 beach get up for I was told I have 2 minutes, so we'll see. Last month, John Tenney brought to the attention of the board the Middlebury College student parties at North 300 Street, facilitated by a landlord who had a brilliant idea of setting up outdoor facilities for students, so as not to damage their own apartment. Well, he also owns a second property which is next to me, and the students moved in February 13th, and the noise problems began that evening at 10 p.m. Techno music coming into my house, 10 below 0. But I've most recently become concerned because he has now put in facilities for outdoor parties next door to me. A fire pit, and which I had to run back chairs, and inexplicably tore down the border fence between our 2 properties while we were away. So I have on the sheet of paper distributed to you 5 questions and comments and proposals. I'm halfway through my time, so I'll be brief. Number 1, the Middlebury Town Charter has noise quiet hours that begin at 1 a.m. on the weekends. I propose we roll that back to something consistent with the city of Burlington, like 10 p.m. And also regarding noise nuisance, there stipulates that a person is $25,000 by violating that noise nuisance. And perhaps that person should extend to all tenants of a house that's from raised. And 2, the Middlebury zoning regulations about rooming houses. And the rooming houses have conditional use permits, and I think we need to clarify exactly what is meant by that. I think that's a pretty important consideration. Item number 3, Middlebury College Department of Public Safety posted a protocol regarding noise complaints originating off campus. And I emailed Sue Ritter asking if any of the students at 53 North Pleasant Street were disciplined for that. And she said, that's information she can't share. So I'd like the board to ask them, has anyone ever been disciplined under this board? And number 4, students living off campus also come under the purview of Middlebury Police Department, town police department. So I'd like to know what their protocol is regarding these noise complaints and large student parties. And do they request identification from students to check for underage drinking? Lastly, number 5, and this is separate from noise complaints, the proliferation of off-campus student housing is impacting affordable housing in our town. The house next to me had 3 families living there, and that landlord purchased the place, turned off their heat, took out the propane tank, moved out, and lost work for making housing. I went twice over times.
Okay.
John Tenning, a quick follow-up on my meeting with you 1 month ago. It has been quieter in recent weeks because there are fewer students there, but they're still having small gatherings. And they're still coming over to our property to urinate because they don't have any facilities on their property. And the landlord provides none and no access to the house. We're being stonewalled by the college. It's not communicating with John or with me. We have third-hand information that the lacrosse team that is in my neighborhood this year, or this year just completed, is to be replaced with alpine ski team for this coming year, and at John's it's to be a football team. So the college is just thumbing their noses in our face, and the landlord is too. We have seen progress in that the state fire marshal has ruled the party barn a public assembly occupancy, for which they are not permitted because they don't meet building code. They don't have a zoning authority in this town for that. We've also seen the police chief issue an order that the landlord is declared a public nuisance and will be fined or receive other legal punishments for continuing big party activity. And finally, this town has ammunition and enforcement opportunities in its ordinances that are there to be used and should be used to set this down. On the rooming house, boarding house business that John mentioned, that's defined in the zoning ordinances as any building where individual rooms are offered for rent on a weekly or monthly basis, with or without meals, off-campus houses occupied by more than 3 unrelated persons shall be deemed rooming houses. In the OFA zone, where 53 North Street is, North Pleasant Street is located, that is a conditional use. And I'm sure that there are no conditional use permits for that property. So that is an area of enforcement. I also know that there's no listing of use, either permitted or conditional, for a bar or a nightclub, which is effectively what's being operated in that parking lot. So we have zoning tools to use, and I would implore you to use those tools.
Just tell you one quick question. You said previously that at night that the college was stonewalling. I understand that they receive information from our police and have their own judicial activities that they do. But these are adults that we're talking about. What role do you think the college should have in how adults comport themselves in a neighborhood and in a community?
The college brings the students of whatever age they are to the community,
They are adults.
and they they place those students in the community, and they approve the residences. They have the responsibility. They have a responsibility for organizing, placement, controls, supervision. And they're failing that business. And I'm calling them. They need to do their job. They have to be good neighbors, good citizens, just like the rest.
John, did you prepare that such as your cohort, John, prepared for us? Your analysis of the zoning issues that could potentially play? Or can you send me an email?
I can send you an email,
You can do that.
just wrapping that up.
And as I had figured before, I think we have what we need. It's just a matter of enforcement.
And time is slipping away on us, so I'm very concerned about it.
I don't think time's slipping away, John. It's been a month.
No, I mean, before the kids get back.
Yeah, okay. So you can send me that. that'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right,
Thanks.
very good. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Oh, one more. Yeah.
One more, I wanted to give them space on both chairs. My name is Colleen Brown, and I know tonight on the agenda is a report on the process for the master plan related to the airport. And the select board has been very generous in terms of listening to the neighbors and trying to get an impression from what we're calling the MANA, the Middlebury Airport Neighborhoods Association, is interested in. And I just wanted to take this time to update the select board that the MANA group is trying to put together a single statement that we can present that would address the merits of the master plan. Since that's not on the agenda tonight, I just wanted to give you that update. It didn't quite fit into that agenda item, but we will be addressing the merits and trying to put our thoughts together and give the select board and the V-Trans and the FAA all of their concise, thorough statement on each of the points of the master plan and where we have objections, where we have concerns, where we're supporting it. And we'll do that in due time, as the deadlines come out, we'll meet those deadlines.
Okay, thanks, Colin. Now it's Jen. Jen, join Judy, who's got her hand up. Judy? Judy, are you with us?
Judy, you had your hand up, or are you all set? Okay, maybe we'll circle back to you at some later point. Thank you.
Okay. In accordance with
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, Judy.
Judy? We lost you. Judy, I need to move on with the meeting if I can. Get
He's
started.
coming in as Judy, you're on mute. Okay, we can't hear you, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Now we got this.
Okay, this is like a Verizon commercial. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I have two questions or two statements. One, this format is really difficult to zoom into. It's difficult to hear and it's difficult to know. Like, how do I know I'm in attendance? I really don't have anything to say. I just want to know if I'm in attendance. how do I know that?
If you can see us and hear us, you're,
I can't hear you.
you can't hear us at all?
Can you hear us now? Can you turn up your speaker a little bit?
Okay. Okay, can you say that again?
Can you turn up your speaker a little bit?
Yep, I've done that, so how do I know I'm in attendance?
If you can see us and hear us, then you are in attendance.
Oh my gosh, okay. That's all I got, and in, on video or like,
Yes, so the format, Judy, is called a webinar format. So you
Yeah.
are there as a participant as long as you can see us and we can see on the screen that you're here. We can't see you physically, but we can see your name listed as
Okay.
attending.
sorry to take up your time, but
Judy,
all good. Thanks so much.
one more thing, it's much clearer if you plug a headset into your computer and plug it in your ears, you'll hear significantly better.
Say that again?
Perfect.
Plug a headset into your
I
computer.
don't have a headset.
Well, I'll buy you
I don't
one.
have a headset.
I'll buy you one and get you one and plug it in. You can plug it in and you'll be able to
Okay.
hear significantly better.
So I'm hoping you'll deliver that like tomorrow.
It might
Thanks so much.
it might be a day later.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna move on. In accordance with 24 VSA Chapter 117, Sections 44, 42, and 44, 44, the Select Board is conducting a public hearing this evening to take questions and comments from the Middlebury community regarding the proposed amendment prepared by the Middlebury Planning Commission to the town's zoning bylaws. In a moment, I will turn the hearing over to Planning and Zoning Director Jennifer Murray, who will review the draft bylaw amendment, which proposes modifications to the zoning map and the zoning subdivision regulations, and explain the purpose behind these changes. During her presentation, if you have a question or comment and would like to address the Select Board, please raise your hand if you are in the room, or use the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Please state your name for the public record, and I would ask that you keep your comments brief on any topic. Should be noted that in accordance with Section 4442, if the Select Board makes substantial changes to the proposed amendment, it must file those changes with the town clerk and planning commission and warn a second public hearing. With that, I will open the public hearing at 7:20 and turn the meeting over to Jennifer.
And I have copies. Yes, please. Yeah, I've got some slides that I'll pass along. Is this the email again? Or a panelist or whatever. Screen sharing is disabled. Are you all able to find the draft bylaws on the website? Come over. Great. It's pretty nice. I was able, like, all through the month of May, I was able to visit different stakeholder groups and just kind of shop the regulations around. So I made sure the college understood them, and ACCT met with us, and we sent them to some properties, and we sent them just anybody else that had like specialized knowledge about affordable housing. So we made sure that we have somebody. There we go. Sort of, thanks. So we're pretty happy with how they ended up. We have a couple planning commission members here tonight. Chris is here, and Lucy is our chair. She's here tonight. Great. So thanks for having me here to present these on your behalf here tonight. Thank you for moving these over. General timeline and context of this project. Back in 2017 is when we started seeking funding for our downtown master plan, which we did and adopted in late 2020. And then in 2020, 2021, we hired a consultant Places to do a triple audit of our zoning, to look at our zoning through a few different lenses. One was the recommendations from the downtown master plan, and another was the application for a neighborhood development area designation. And the third was just from the laundry list that the zoning administrators gave for myself and Dave about things that were not working well or broken. She gave us over 140 recommendations, and, gave us some drafts, language, and some really cool graphics to include in the plan. And so then, between reviewing those things and afterward, the planning commission had over 26 meetings. Oh, it says over 25. It ended up being 26, 27 at the end, to go through and just start refining her recommendations. This is in general the timeline for adoption. I mean, you're well into it now. The planning commission has already had their public hearing and sent the zoning amendment to the select board. This is your first public hearing. And then after this hearing, you'll request edits from the planning commission and either choose to adopt the bylaws as they are tonight, or if you have changes, which you decide to make a substantial change. If so, you'll need to have another meeting. But we're really shooting for an effective date at the end of August, September. Hopefully it would be the time that we could get that NDA designation. And that's a lovely thing, because when we have an NDA designation, affordable housing developers, like Summit Properties, can really get their funding in order to try to get the next construction season. So the planning commission tried really hard to keep up our grants to get this to you as soon as possible.
Jen, of course, I know all these acronyms, but you could spell them out for anyone who might not.
Yeah, the presentation is so hard because it goes into detail later on, but,
Okay.
so, NDA is a neighborhood development area, and it's a state designation that, provides, an affordable housing developer with various incentives. So the idea is we can make our regulations as great as we like, but what would the cost of, construction, both materials and labor, unless we can provide a little additional incentive, we might not see a lot of development down here, because they could just as easily be building in Chittenden County and getting reaping more for their money. So that incentive will really help us be, attractive to them. So, yeah, this is the public process I just sort of explained. We've got that downtown master plan we can rely on. That's exactly the way you're supposed to do it. That's textbook, to have a big community planning process, a lot of input before you start changing regulations that deal with things like downtown housing. That's exactly what the downtown master plan was focused on. So we're in good shape. And then planning commission meetings and in-person stakeholder meetings really helped fill out the input that we used in the planning commission in terms of the changes we see tonight. So we went over the technical assistance that we had. From me to PlaySense to PBC, our downtown master plan consultant, we didn't do alone. And so then I just tried to refine the three basic purposes of the amendment. One is to encourage downtown vitality. The other is to encourage strong neighborhoods, specifically in and around downtown. And the third is enable construction of new mixed income neighborhoods. So what do we mean by, what do we do to encourage downtown vitality? We modernized our zoning language and definitions. We're trying to capture uses and visions identified in the downtown master plan that may not have been adequately captured in existing regulations. So we're just sort of updating those. We added provisions for outdoor dining and public arts and downtown farmers markets and pop-ups and mobile food carts. I did a little training, just want to capture a screenshot for you. This is an expert in planning saying, we need to be attuned to the fact that consumer preferences have changed in our downtowns. Previous generations were consumers of goods through department stores and antique shops, and now the new generations are consumers of experiences, which Karen's definitely been telling us for some time now and doing a great job helping with. So we shouldn't just be designers and planners, but experience builders. So I'm hoping that these regulations, really sort of capture that. One place that we try to capture a sentiment is trying to protect the social space and sort of pedestrian interest in the downtown core. We have a fairly tiny downtown. We have to make sure it stays vital in the limited blocks that we have. And so there is a provision in there that says that on Merchants Row, Park Street, Main Street, the ground floor businesses need to be active uses, and we have those quoted in our table of active use. It's, retail and other places they would visit as a customer, restaurant, food space, etc. And that's to keep these downtown spaces that are on the ground level. So just a note on some of the lessons we learned in the downtown master plan. We know that there's a shortage of workforce housing. We interviewed, Dan was there, interviewed local hotel owners, restaurants, retail stores, large institutions, and we revealed a significant shortage of housing for their employees anywhere near the downtown area. And when they could find something in their range, it tended to be a substandard quality, and then missing middle housing. The study indicated a significant impact in demand for missing middle housing in downtown Middlebury. And so that means a range of affordable choices, all shapes and sizes, all kinds of neighbors. Our communities obviously do better with middle class and workforce homes near job schools and transit. And it's a nationwide issue, it's a statewide issue, it's not just Middlebury. Just a few statistics of interest. These are the nationwide statistics. I would say that some of these will be even more exaggerated in Vermont. The household sizes are shrinking. Nearly 30% of households are single person households. Families being redefined, 75 to 85 of households won't have children in them by 2025, so they need a little smaller footprint. There's a demand for a different size, different kind of house. And so this is just a graph that shows you what I mean by missing middle housing. It's duplex, fourplex, these cottage courts and townhouses, multiplexes. Over here on the left is what we have, like predominantly these detached single family homes. Over on the right is something you might find in the new scheme if it's a little rich for our blood, like on the right side. But that missing middle is where we really like to incentivize some housing, because it tends to be smaller sizes and more affordable for these other kinds of family types. So that's the gist of it. Don't forget your rapidly aging population. We heard a lot of input during the downtown master plan. There are people, empty nesters, who would like to move to like a small, well-furnished place in downtown, and then would forget their house for a family. Should be demand for walkable living, just some more statistics from the last EPA conference. But people who are looking for walkable living are looking for a place. And I promised this whole presentation wasn't this dry, and I feel like I just kind of need to give you this background in a little piece. But so downtown Middlebury is kind of constrained, and we don't have a lot of blighted areas for large scale redevelopment. There's a map showing that. So, on the left, we're constrained by the college campus. To the north, we're constrained by Weybridge. These dark green areas to the east are the town forests. And so, much like Burlington, like when I lived in Burlington, I was always disappointed because there wasn't like an old spaghetti restaurant or something. There's no old district, because Burlington itself is constrained by the intervalled wetlands on the north and the lake on the left. So they've had to use every bit of space to its highest and best purpose, and they tear down old things and build new things in their stead. And so Middlebury has a sort of interesting, similar situation where we're constrained. So we have to use the space that we have wisely. And so in the downtown master plan, we had this map, which showed, this is a housing opportunities map that showed some vacant parcels with opportunity for housing, and that sort of translated into our zoning map here. Everywhere you see this dark brown is the R20 district, which scares some people because it sounds like 20 units per acre. It is 20 units per acre, but it's 20 units per acre if there's no wetlands, if there's no other constraints. You have to look at the site. You're not actually going to get 20 units an acre. You shouldn't just do multiplication like 100 acres times 20, 2,000 units. Oh my God, there's actually like a little bit of site plan magic that comes in there. There are site constraints that will keep a developer from fully developing But in general, R20, the dark brown, these are vacant parcels where we would like to encourage new neighborhoods and new development. And so I just think it's really good that the planning commission has looked ahead and just trying to identify those. Now, we coupled that with some zoning that says that if you're building in that district, or if you're building in this pink district, or this orange district, and it's 5 or more new units, that triggers what's called the traditional neighborhood design standards. And it's a set of special standards like a PUD. You're probably most familiar with PUD standards. It's like a PUD, like where there's specialized standards that ensure that this new neighborhood has the appearance that you want, that it's walkable, tree-lined streets, that houses are oriented correctly so that the front door is on the sidewalk and not just hidden away, just facing the garage. These are all elements of good design for healthy, beautiful neighborhoods, but they're also elements that the state requires for the NDA designation. That's right, the TND standards for the NDA designation, which is so confusing. But so in order to get that incentive designation from the state, you need to literally check boxes in their checklist that our zoning requires that new construction looks like this. So that's what we've done with the TND standards. And then, we expanded some mixed use options near the downtown core. So this heritage industrial district, the light peach here, is a new district that allows really high residential density, but then also allows some commercial uses to go with it. In this mixed use district, it replaces our former VRC district, which it's not much different actually from the VRC, but what we've done is we've extended it up the right side of Exchange Street on that side. Because when we studied our industrial district, we compared it to a lot of other towns and found that it's really weirdly close to downtown. And we tried to figure out how we were gonna I say deal with that, but it's a good problem to have on our zoning map. We compared ourselves to Winooski. They actually have an industrial district walking distance from their downtown. What they did was they made it a nice mixed use corridor, transitioned you from those industrial manufacturing uses into the apartment buildings and the offices that are characteristic of that downtown core. So that's what this mixed use district attempts to do. That experiment is only on one side of Exchange Street because you have to acknowledge that there are some pretty heavy commercial uses that are really attractive on the other side that would be good for living right next to it. And so what does this look like? Just reminding you that this is one of the images from that downtown master plan. This is in front of the Shaw's Plaza. It was one thing that our urban designers said we could potentially do in the future. You could close off the bank, say, and put in homes like this. And so what he's showing you here is retail on the ground floor and apartments up above. And so that's what we mean by mixed use. And this could also be several stories higher as well. We would fit in some more apartments. And so that's just kind of what we would anticipate potentially being in those districts. And then just the neighborhoods in general. I wanted to encourage strong neighborhoods in and around our downtown, just making sure we take care of and encourage more of the good things than what we already have. So this on top is our existing zoning, and this on the bottom is the proposed zoning. So on the top, there's this really big light yellow district, the high density residential district. And it doesn't really, it doesn't necessarily fit all the different neighborhoods that are in the high density residential because the neighborhoods really sort of vary. They're different ages, so we just kind of split it up. We just broke it up into smaller sub zoning districts to sort of, and then we changed the lot size and setbacks and things like that to more accurately typify what was happening in those neighborhoods. Because when you're over here at the end of Waverly Street or over on Woodall, you're not the same kind of neighborhood. It doesn't have the same kind of feel. South Street doesn't feel like Woodall. I feel like I could talk about that for a long time. I'm a little bit lost in it. But basically, we just took a great big catch-all district and divided it up into individual districts that sort of match the neighborhoods that were there. I'm happy to answer more questions about that. And then, you know, part of encouraging strong neighborhoods too is encouraging infill development with accessory dwelling units. And so we loosened up the rules on accessory dwelling units even more. And now that we're broken up, you know, sort of by neighborhood and several other zoning districts, we were able to lower the side setback in different areas that you could add accessory dwelling unit. And that's an example of what we mean by accessory dwelling units. These are very, I don't know that anyone lives in this garage, but it seems like a good idea too. And this is just a couple graphics I wanted to show you from that traditional neighborhood design section, the PUD section we have that's triggered by the 5 or more units in the R20 and a couple of the other districts. It actually shows you street standards, you know, like there's actual standards in there so that we can work with the developer when they submit an application to make sure that that we get what we want, but then also like from their perspective, so it's a little bit more prescriptive so they know what to expect when they come in. So standards for creating green space, standards for creating a pedestrian street. There's affordability provisions. There's provisions for varying the type of housing every so many units. And so, there's a good picture. So sometimes people like hear the term affordable housing and they balk, but this is what we're talking about. We're talking about affordable housing. We're talking about different housing types for different kinds of families at all ranges of income. You know, it's not like the Bronx or something. I studied a lot of that in grad school and I really liked it, but it would be rural myself. So yeah, we altered the definition of social service facilities that Warren's mentioning when we're talking about strong neighborhoods. We altered the definition and we made sure that we had uses in there that closely fit the things that we were hearing from the service providers that they need to provide. So, like, you know, recovery residence is anyone, you know, as different from transitional housing, as different from residential care facility, and then coded that across the different zoning districts. And I met with I met with that consortium group, the Continuum of Care group, that's composed of Charter House and John Graham, and you know, we've been to their meetings a couple times. Yeah, just to make sure that they were okay with this, and I think I got some pretty good buy-in. I left the door open in case they want to change anything down the line. That's the thing. None of this is set in stone. We can always do another bylaw next year. Job security for me, right? So the NDA area, this is just a little graphic that shows really quickly some of those incentives I was talking about. So the neighborhood development area is all the way to the right. And basically, if you are able to meet their definition of, I forget what the term is. See, what's the term for what's the term? It's like affordable, it's like an affordable housing project, right? What they call it something.
Oh, priority housing.
Thank you. A priority housing project. If you meet their definition of a priority housing project, then you qualify for, then you're exempt from Act 250, and you'll get a reduction in water and wastewater fees and exemption from land gains tax and all of these things that are over my head, but I know help developers when they're putting together their performance. So these are great. These are incentives that we have to pay for at the town level. It's like a state level incentive that we absolutely should be reading. This is a draft map, but like basically, if that road swatch is the downtown area, then you get to go another half a mile outside your downtown area with your NDA designation. And I've been talking to the state about even bumping out in a couple places a little bit further as well. And then once we get the bylaw in place, then we can start to really turn up the heat of the state having that conversation and defining that area a little bit better. So yeah, that's like the general overview. I feel like I should probably mention that we had some changes to the ideally you've looked through what's online. I've just told you what you need to know, I think, about the affordable housing aspect of these changes. We also had a little bit of housekeeping changes too. And one was class 3 wetlands and buffers. We took those out. The state regulates class 1 and 2 wetlands. The town is going above and beyond regulating class 3 wetlands. They're a little bit harder to identify, but the Conservation Commission, the good news, is working on some wetlands mapping with a consultant that we've hired over the last several years. So we're close to having some mapping that like let us add in class 3 wetlands again in the future once we have something to use to regulate it. Floodplain regulations are being altered, just a couple changes in accordance with state law. Fluvial erosion hazard areas, that was this subject of some debate during the planning commission hearing. It was something staff proposed to take out altogether, these fluvial erosion hazard areas, which are above and beyond the floodplain. We had a letter from regional planning, involvement of the conservation commission, the planning commission. I think we've all reached an amicable solution where we leave fluvial erosion hazard areas in there, but just dial it back a little bit so that 6 or 7 affected property owners in East Middlebury could rebuild a garage if it fell down or do something with their property. The affected property owners are right at Grisnell Ridge Road, but the Marcus is. Cannabis was something that we really grappled with. We didn't have a definition for retail cannabis. We had one, and we put it in the table of uses. And we tried to think about where we would want retail cannabis to be, and selected the mixed use district, like over by Shaw's, the protected highway district going down Route 7, but did not select this section of downtown from the Congregational Church up to here. And since we made that decision, we actually had an application come in, sort of under the wire for across the way at Devin's law office. It won't be his law office, obviously it'll be a retail cannabis store when he completes his move. So that helped us, I think, I don't want to speak on behalf of you guys, but I think that helped us feel like, well, at least there's one in the downtown area, let's wait and see how that goes, and we could always expand it to some other areas later on. Yeah, that's really up to you guys. We did our best on that one. I think that's all I have to say.
Any questions? Did anybody get a chance to go through all that? It was pretty well done, and then the red was the changes. And if you're looking to tie it back to something, you have to go back to the, was it 2018, I guess was the last one, but you have to go back to the back of zoning books.
I have a quick question. Is there a tension between having larger setbacks in the lower R residential zones and allowing full development? How do you handle that?
Yeah, I think that, so when we had an R2 or an R4, it was an older neighborhood where we didn't see a lot of potential for retail development.
Just there hasn't been any, or you don't think there's any interest in it?
Well, it was, Forum Lane. Thank you. It was Forum Lane and Buttall, and these sort of tract subdivisions, post 1940s subdivisions, where people didn't have a lot that was a whole lot larger than they needed in most cases, and so it's hard to picture like an additional structure that would need to get really close to the setback. But that said, we do have a provision for setback waivers. And I'm really glad you brought that up, because the ZA asked me to ask you guys if it would be okay if, right now the new bylaws say that you can grant a setback waiver up to 50%. Sorry, this bylaw regulation says that you can grant a setback waiver up to 50% of the setback for new construction and 30% for existing construction. And he's already gotten a few applications and he feels like that's overly complicated. He wants to know if you guys do want to just go 50% on everything, and if that's not working out, if we could have it back to 30.
Yes.
He also requested that in the definition of subdivision, as we define what is subdivision, what requires subdivision review, somehow got in there that condominiumizing or having it making something into a condo would require a full subdivision review. And that's kind of complicated as well. So he wondered if we could take, the condo reference out of the definition of subdivision.
John had a comment.
Just asking, what are the steps to come in the process, just so we can understand how this will move forward?
Oh, yeah, okay, I'll let you know. How do you guys feel about the condo thing first?
So when you condoize,
Figure that out.
you take an existing single owner property.
Yeah.
And you now have some kind of agreement about shared spaces and multiple owners of that one property, is that correct?
Yeah, it's more like, changing how the ownership would work. Like instead of someone renting that apartment, now they can be the owner of that apartment. And so they go through this process with their attorney to make it a condo.
No.
And that's happening to us over in Seymour Street, and it's just kind of ridiculous to think that we would need to send them through an entire subdivision process to accomplish that.
Seems like, I mean, is there a way to write in some sort of minimum number of units or something to trigger the full condo process? Because it seems like, I mean, I used to live in a house down here that, on South Street that, out there, that the college owned and had split up into, more than one unit.
Yeah.
So would that technically then be a condo?
Yeah,
If we owned it. I mean.
Yeah, we've actually talked to the town attorney about this as well, like, none of them are proposing going halfway with this. They're saying, I think you should just take condo out of the definition of subdivision altogether, because it's something that you would do with your attorney, it's like it's a private legal type of a thing, as opposed to something that should be regulated by zoning. And I was dumb and did not do this at the planning commission level, so now I have to interview it, I apologize.
I think that makes sense, right? There's not any,
You could tie it, like a tied knots, like Howard Lake property is condominiumized, and then all of the property is owned by 3 houses. And so it's shared, so, but we own our houses, so, and that was totally legal. Then we have a total of 4 tax bills, but, so it works and it works well. I don't think that the town needs to be involved in that, but we have to have multiple lawyers involved, so throw you in there, it'll take up a lot of your time, you've got more to do than worry about. You've already approved the buildings based upon
Right,
the ownership, I don't think that's our bill.
that's the way to think about it, right? That unit wouldn't exist unless they met our dimensional criteria, right?
agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should I answer John's question now?
Why don't you answer John on the process?
Okay. So, depending on how big a change they want to make tonight, they'll either need to warn another public hearing, or they'll be able to just approve the bylaw amendment tonight. Or no, they'll be able to just say that this looks good. Either way, we have one more meeting. So if they have a substantial change, then there'll be a public hearing where more input is taken. If they're good with it tonight, it'll just be a regular meeting to do the adoption.
And we find this for review on the regular town boards.
Yes.
Yes, and I think because they're so busy and maybe a little short staffed, I had a letter to the editor that was supposed to be published a couple of weeks ago, so I feel bad that it did not get published. I followed up on it today because I hadn't seen it last week, so I didn't either calling attention to this. So I do feel like we should at least have a second meeting, whether it needs to be a hearing, but at least provide opportunity to call attention. I do know John Flowers wrote about this, and we've had other meetings that have been posted about this review as well. So
Yeah, I don't know how much these warnings must have cost Kathleen, but they're long warnings in the legal section.
I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
So not everybody reads the warnings.
You could perhaps defer action without calling for review.
Right, that's what I'm suggesting. Any other questions from you? I do have a couple. You could go to section 7. 776, the temporary structures and uses. There's a verbiage in there. On the review, it's 45. They have fancy enough for a system that I can highlight my stuff. There's so many pages I didn't print it all out. There's something about 6. It's not, it's 6 hours. There's
Oh, 6 months?
6 months.
It's the temporary piece, January section.
I might be in the wrong section.
Oh, yeah, there's a word missing, isn't there, Ryan?
It's there. Temporary uses operating than 6 hours. There it is. Isn't that in that spot?
Yeah, would have been temporary, less than 6 hours, right?
It says, the draft that I have says temporary uses operating less than 6 hours in a given day or over no more than 3 days.
Yeah, the word less needs to be put in there.
The word less needs to be.
Okay, thank you.
And is 6 hours the right amount? This is my question. Like if the farmer's market is there, do they ever do it for the full day, or would they ever? Should it be 8 hours? Where did we come up with 6 hours?
Yeah, Karen and I have talked about this. I think we were thinking mostly of midnight stroll as 6 hours. It could be different if you want.
I just, when I was reading through it, I was just thinking, well, 6 hours is, I know it's probably a random number that you came up with trying to be scientific about it. But I was thinking, what about a one-day event that was an 8-hour day or something? We change the rules when it trips over that 6 hours.
Do you think like 8 to 10 hours? 8 or 10 maybe?
I was just thinking a day event, whatever a day event would be. If you did it from 9 to 6, you're talking about a 9 hours, so maybe 10 hours.
Do we need to specify the number of hours in the day? Maybe it's just no more than 3 days iteration. That's what I was thinking.
Temporary uses operating more than a given day. So if it was more than a one-day event,
We did keep the 3-day in just to protect for the midnight stroll events, so that we could bring in pop-ups. It could be the same pop-up, for all 3 nights of the stroll, something like that. So that's what Jen and I were kind of brainstorming the way to sort of capture what's truly temporary as opposed to a pop-up that's coming in to set up for 6 months.
okay, so look, why don't we say, we look at that maybe, and then just, if you have a recommended change for our next meeting.
Yeah, I think, what if we said temporary uses operating no more than 3 days in association with a particular event would qualify for this exemption? And then if it's gonna operate more than 3 days in association with a particular event, then it should be permitted as natural use.
Okay.
Does that work? Yeah. Okay, we'll take out that 6 hours, it's silly, right?
Well,
Yeah.
it seemed random to me.
You guys
when I
are
read
okay?
through it. Then, on there has been, I would be remiss if I didn't just make sure we're clear on it. Because there has been a lot of talk about the local food service and the desire. I know it came out in our master planning process that it was agreed that people would kind of like to have it. And I did find it in the existing regulations where that retail sales from a vehicle or stand, whether temporary or ongoing, would have to have a change of use permit. So we'd have to come to you to get a change of use. And I know you're trying to grapple with it here. Can you just explain, make sure I understand what we're doing with the food products here?
Yeah. So there's already that language, that fairly vague language in the zoning that we've interpreted as a food cart requiring a zoning permit. And so what the section 775 does, it just makes it a little bit clearer. So the idea is, if we clarify it, then we're encouraging use, because in the downtown master plan, we said we wanted them. So we want to make sure that we're enabling the use by being clear, just like we try to be prescriptive with our developers about what our expectations are. how it would actually work is they would give us a permit. It wouldn't need to be like an engineered site plan or anything fancy. Just a Google Maps printout, just marked up with where the food carts are gonna go. What we really wanna do is send it to the police chief and the fire chief to make sure people are safe. So it's just a public safety consideration, most likely.
And is this zone specific for the downtown area, or like if I was having a wedding at my house, does that now cover that?
Yeah, it says any mobile food service vendor on private property. So yeah, you should probably just get a permit for something at your house too.
So I brought food vendors to my business for customer appreciation days. And if it's a private event, can we define it as a public event? Public events, because that way we wouldn't have to get involved in private events. Can you look at that?
And does this encompass the bank always does like hot dog day? Does that count? It's like a mobile food service and we give out free hot dogs every day. I love hot dog day.
I missed that.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing.
Jeez.
So, yeah, what I told them at the public hearing was when I was in Williston, there were people standing in line for hot dogs and I got hit by fucking kills. Happens all the time. And then somebody, when I first started here, tried to put a hot dog cart at Champlain Fuels. And their plan was to have people like run across the Champlain Fuels parking lot to go get their hot dog and then run back across it. And you've got those trucks with picking out of those things. So I just want to avoid that kind of thing. That's a thought. Maybe we can add like weddings and other private parties to our list of exemptions, so that you could still have this as it stands, but just have that exemption that would come
Yeah, I'm
into
just
play.
looking for not to get involved in all the private events, but when we have a public event, which is typically in our downtown, whether you call it, and maybe you don't zone it, that you just do an exemption as a private, invite only event or something like that, that it wouldn't be subject to that.
Right. Weddings and private parties.
Right.
We can have some draft language for your next meeting. We meet this Thursday, so we can talk about that and I'd like to get Dave more involved in that conversation too. Yeah, that's a good thought.
I don't want to flood your office either.
Yeah.
Karen?
Right, but a burger night would be dangerous, but I guess that's because people are coming to, oh, with that, sorry.
I think Karen had a
I just have one clarifying question about this, Dan. When I talked to you guys about this at the planning commission meeting, we had talked about the folks that are doing private properties, like for instance, Town Hall Theater, that's bringing in food trucks into the alley. They could submit an annual site plan for review. I see that in here, but one thing that I also see that I just wanted clarification on is the first sentence saying mobile food service vendors may apply for a zoning permit. So is the onus still on the vendor, not the organizer?
Yeah, I don't know, like if you wanna talk about onus, it's like whoever owns the property is the person who's gonna make the zoning violation.
I think that's the part that I'm just hoping, because the way that it's written, it sounds like the vendor themselves is who is supposed to apply.
Yeah.
And I would like to see it be the site that applies, so that we take the onus off of these vendors that potentially have to then do more paperwork to be able to come in.
So the way my permit application looks is we have applicants, and they sign as applicant and owner. And so it's not for me to decide who that applicant is gonna be.
Okay,
So it could be the vendor, it could be the realtor, it could be the organization.
okay, just
Just
wanted the
one.
clarification on that, because as I said in the meeting, I just, we're competing in, with other towns and trying to get some of these people here, and I don't wanna make it harder, I don't wanna try to.
I don't think that's gonna make it harder than, they call our office, we just give them the permit form and explain how to fill it out.
Right, but you're saying that the site can do that?
The site.
Yeah, so like Town Hall Theater would do it if they wanted to have food trucks.
Yeah, so if someone
It
wants to
wouldn't be
sign,
Roll and Rooster that's it.
so if someone wants to sign as owner and applicant, they can use that.
And we're okay as far as all of the rules, if the farmer's market wanted to come back down percentage that had to be agriculture, but farmers market.
Yeah, so if the farmer's market wants to be on public property, then it doesn't fall under zoning at all, and it would be a public assembly.
Oh, okay.
But if the farmer's market wants to be on private property and wants to like qualify as a farmer's market under ag and markets law, they would have to meet those stipulations that we have in here. And then we just added a couple little tweaks to make it more like downtown appropriate.
Yeah.
Um,
I was getting through, I was getting confused.
It's
Thank you
confusing.
for the clarification.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jen, we have a question from Shannon Becker. That's the County Community Trust. Is it true that proposed updates apply now within 180 days of adoption? So currently, private parties would need a permit.
Is she gonna invite me to this private party? It affects my cancer. Yeah, so I mean, that is true. That
She
under-
said yes.
Yeah. Well, that case. No, yeah, I think that since technically according to the law, once the bylaw amendment is warned by the select board, we need to review every incoming application under both sets of bylaws, and the more stringent takes effect. But since we're working this out, I thought we could find a way to not pay attention to Lisa's party for a little while and just kind of like work it out with her. Because I think Brian makes a good point, so. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if it's, yeah. Does her private party need a permit? Yes, that would be the technical answer. But would that really be the answer
She'll follow.
that we would come up with? We're not monsters.
I have a question. And we talked about this before, but if, let's say the Marble Works gets a permit for the whole year, does that mean they can have different vendors? Each vendor doesn't have to also get a permit?
The way I read it is if they have a permit for their site and they say this is where we're gonna put our food vendors, and as long as they keep their food vendors there, they can rotate food vendors.
Is that what you mean by different vendors, different
Yeah, I mean,
vendors?
because the way it says mobile food vendors may apply. If the Marble Works applies, then could they have different vendors? Do those different vendors have to also sign an application?
Different vendors that are not selling food?
Yeah, they're selling food, but they're like, you know, one weekend they got somebody, and one weekend they got somebody else.
Yeah, so, you know, outside of the regulations, you know, the way that we were talking about administering this to make it easier for everyone is to do sort of a master vendor permit for the whole site. So in that case, it would be the person who owns the site or the property, it'd probably be the Marble Works, or maybe Lisa as the organizer. And then she would show us footprints on this plan.
Yes. Right? So different vendors could go in there. One week it would be Mr. Taco up in the right corner, the next week it could be Mr. Hot Dog.
Right,
In that same spot.
right. And I imagine that permit would have a term with it as well. A term, you know, like a certain amount of time. So it wouldn't be like Mr. Hot Dog all year long.
That's
Like, we
where
just
it's
get
at.
food. Just get food. So you're on the planning commission, so we'll have a lot of time to know whether these
Just want
things
to know
on
what
Thursday.
people think that this means, and then we'll talk about it.
Okay. So you weren't really asking.
And I'm a strong proponent of that style of oversight. You're talking about private property, you know, and our job isn't to vet vendors, our job is to make sure that it's a safe and planned environment. So I would argue it's overreach if we go beyond that. So I do like your plan, I think it's really good. As long as hopefully we can craft something that makes it work like that, so it's workable for you and it's workable for folks, what we ask for. And one other question, and it's up top on the food parts, is should have written them all down when I was reading them. Anybody else have any questions? We picked up anything else? Yes, John.
Jim, just, you said you were struggling with the zoning of the cannabis dispensary. They can addenda, the initial drive, the dispensary was to have a downtown to bring in traffic to the central commercial area. So that's what you see.
Then we ran into the question of how, in a tiny downtown like this, how many dispensaries would you like to line up on Main Street? Like, how many is the right critical mass
I don't have an
dispensaries?
answer to that.
Yeah, so
When I
since
heard
we know
that,
we're getting one.
Yeah. when I heard that there was a dispensary gonna be out by Great Market, I thought that was too far away. To use it.
I hadn't heard that one. Yeah, that would be kind of hard.
I think that is wayside.
Are there any questions, hands up online, Kathleen, at all?
Quiet.
Ross?
I was wondering, is there anything in the regulations that addresses solar orientation of buildings that are being built?
Yeah, there is.
So that, hopefully if they're not putting solar panels on the building right now, they can, down the road, be solar ready.
Yeah, there is. The traditional neighborhood design standards, like as we're talking about tree lined streets and sidewalks and things like that, we ask that they orient the building for solar being to the extent possible. And we did add a line that said, as we're evaluating the extent possible, we are allowed to take the financial considerations into consideration. Do that, encourage them to do that. Nothing new.
Thanks. So we have a couple of things we've asked you to look at. What's the feeling of the board on one of the potentially contentious issues that Ben pointed out is the cannabis retail in the downtown. And there is already a run-through application, and the amendment would not allow any further, at least at this time. Thoughts from the board, would you stay the course with Jen's recommendation, Ben's recommendation? Or do you have a different thought?
No, I think we should stay the course with them. I have not seen any data that says bringing cannabis shops downtown is gonna improve downtown business. I have not seen any data of that at all. I would say if you wanna improve traffic in downtown, I would get Discount Beverage, put their store right in downtown, because that's the busiest store in town. So if that's what you're looking for, let's have them downtown. But, I'm not in favor of cannabis being anywhere downtown. So if we're gonna get away with just this one over here, I'm comfortable with that, but I would not like not to see any more coming to town. I don't wanna build an economy on cannabis sales. I don't think that's what Middlebury is.
My instinct is exactly the opposite of that. I think that you don't let the first person submit a permit have a monopoly on any business in your town. I think you let them compete and decide what the right model is based on what they want.
I'm also thinking about, and I don't know how, I haven't read all of the cannabis regulations from the state. So maybe this is inconsequential, but, is there an opportunity for some kind of retail establishment that sells other things? And there's also a little cannabis counter, and this would preclude them from having that, like something Facebook in the back. I will say I was recently in Northampton, Massachusetts, which has a population of about 30,000. Their downtown is probably 5 times our size, and they have 4 very tasteful retail cannabis places that you would not know are cannabis places. They look like little shops or whatever. I guess I'm mostly in agreement with Andy that we would never say you can only have one bookshop. we're not saying you can't sell wine downtown other than the one we have. The one that I know of, which is in the stone mill, and stuff. So that said, I'm kind of okay either way. There's at least the one, but I do feel eerie about giving the people who are quickest off the start the chance to have a monopoly feels a little bit icky to me.
It's not necessarily a monopoly in the town.
No, but downtown.
Yeah, it's just in the district. I mean, I would say that Hanford Shopping Plaza gets more business traffic than probably the downtown does, sadly. But that parking lot's full all the time. So that's where I would think I would put my store.
So I don't know how many cannabis stores we need downtown, but I agree with Dan's statement about if you say that cannabis store is bringing traffic downtown, I don't think it's going to bring a lot of traffic downtown versus other businesses who can potentially bring more customers.
I do think any store will bring traffic downtown. I mean,
But
and I think we're in a place where we're struggling to find, as the retail environments of downtowns have changed, some places have left, some places are coming in, and I think there are a lot of business owners that are trying to find a niche. That's why I was wondering about a shop that sold, other things, but also cannabis, because a lot of places downtown that are successful are doing more than one thing, and they're making use of that space to do more than one thing. So I wouldn't want to preclude somebody from doing that. If the little cannabis in the background is what's helping to keep their shop afloat, and their shop has other stuff.
Yes, Karen. Karen, what do you think?
Oh, really?
Really? I go to you all the time.
Well, I was not prepared to answer this question tonight, but I will say that I think I'm in agreement with Lee on this, in that I really want to see us not be discriminatory. I gave up caffeine yesterday, I'm sorry. Towards any business specifically. So I wouldn't necessarily want to see us, to her point, limiting number of stores or number of wine shops, where I think that we do owe it to our businesses to give a little bit of a free market opportunity. So that's where I'm coming in on this. But I'm also just looking forward to seeing how things play out here. I have yet to see data that supports one or another idea of what this actually does to a community like Middlebury. So I'm not really worried about it from that perspective. I'm excited for any of these new businesses to come in, and I'm sort of just wanting to see what that does.
About stormwater.
Who's here for the culverts?
Yeah. About this particular, I don't know what, I think both sides make great comments, and I guess I want to see how it goes.
That's it.
I would say I agree with Heather in the sense of I hear both sides. But I'm definitely going to support Lindsay on this one, and the same thing, but seeing how it goes, but also giving space for others who want to sell cannabis or sell other things, making space for that.
Are there any kind of in shops that we would not want downtown?
Yeah, I can think of one.
Yeah, you think of one too?
Spencer. Please say where you are, don't come over here. If you don't know what Spencer is, good.
I think the free market would shut down Spencer Gifts in downtown Middlebury pretty fast.
Okay, yeah, I think so. I think so too.
Yeah, but like a sex shop, for example. I've honestly seen tasteful ones that you would not know are there. They just have something posted, like you have to be 18 years old to come in. And you wouldn't realize what it was until you go in and the windows are tastefully covered, like frosted. And I don't know. What we have, a laundry place.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, I never went in, so. I just saw the laundry. Okay, yeah, see.
So, just for, I've given a lot of thought to this because Jeff pointed out the last time we met, this was going to be an issue. And, here's my thinking on it. We voted in the community to support campus. The vote, well, John says it was about the downtown. There was a few people arguing about that, but it was really about access for those who wanted to use campus. So the vote was not, do we put a row of cannabis stores in downtown? The vote was, do we approve the sale of cannabis in downtown? I didn't take that as an overriding demand to populate our downtown cannabis stores. We were talking at the time about where we would want them, whether we would want them downtown or not. Back looking at that vote. Clearly, there is an approved cannabis store already that's coming, and we have actually shut down competition in some areas. The town of Middlebury did not have another automotive dealership. You can't have a Tesla dealership. You can't have any. So it's not like we're going to that extreme if we're saying that we are going to hold off on additional cannabis dispensaries in the downtown. I think there are certain things that could have a greater impact on to change the fabric of the downtown. There's different activities that can potentially have a big influence on what the downtown is and becomes. Certainly, I would agree a cannabis store in that particular category. So I worry about when you would have some critical mass. If this is, will it change the way the downtown is experienced by everybody? So I'm not necessarily opposed to instituting this rule. Just seeing how it goes, not with the ability to go back in and say, okay, it's been a positive experience. We can open it up to other retailers. But it will allow us to ease our kind of our foot into the water and see what that really is like in our downtown. Frankly, if you hear the general consensus, we have no parking down here. So if somebody really wanted a successful one-day have a drive-through, maybe out on Exchange Street or something like that. So, this isn't like we're giving somebody a monopoly. The one thing that I fear is changing our downtown too rapidly over what we've traditionally had. And I would like to ease into it personally. So I would be supportive of that regulation with the idea that we would review it again next year. You could do this process pretty quickly if you were to make one change. And I don't think a year is really enough to know, frankly, it'd be a couple of years. They're not even going
If, one thing, if we decide to go that route, that I would suggest, although it would add a little bit of work for staff, is some tracking into the number of inquiries for new stores in the downtown. like in that monitoring period of 2 years, has the planning and zoning office seen, how many inquiries have they had about opening retail cannabis in downtown? Has it been 0? Has it been 20? I think that might have some impact on which way we decided to go on that.
I think we'd say we're not going to approve any, we're going to get fewer potential inquiries than we would otherwise.
Or Brandon.
Yeah, which other towns in Madison County have retail authorized?
I think all the ones that have a cute downtown.
Virginia, Bristol, Brandon?
Brandon. I could be wrong, I mean,
Yes.
I should probably mention one other thing to you, I would feel bad if I hadn't mentioned it. Like, so when we heard testimony from Dave Silverman, he talked about litigation, he talked about all the reasons why he thought that it was illegal to regulate retail cannabis differently than other kinds of retail, and was talking sort of litigious opinion. And when I talked to other planners, Middlebury, unfortunately, is one of the first towns to opt in, and so we're sort of like at the forefront of all of this. A lot of planners and other towns are holding back to wait and see like how the litigation works out to figure out if that really is something that we can regulate. Some people think. And don't forget, there's a local cannabis control board too. I mean, I was talking to Fred Dunnington, and he was like, "Why not just regulate it through the local cannabis control board and not zoning at all?" I think there is some merit to that idea as well.
Are they stood up yet?
No, because I think we have to vote to create one. Right? Yeah, it would be a local cannabis control board as opposed to the state cannabis control board.
We control alcohol through the select board.
And as you know, that's a fairly limited oversight that
Yes.
the board has, and I suspect it will probably be similar for cannabis. So we have to be realistic about that, and I don't know what the state has said that towns are able to do.
So nobody's made a decision whether select boards can be,
Oh, there has been a decision about that, but I don't know if the regulations that supporting that, or what the extent of the oversight is. I could research that.
It's the same guidance document that we've been reading so closely, and even the state gave us a guidance document, they didn't really explain what they meant by these things. And so we won't really know what it means until there's a couple of lawsuits that get complete, and then we'll know what the towns are able to do.
So one thing I would like to avoid is any more litigation on the town's bill. So whatever the recommendation would be to potentially allow some of these other towns to foot the bill on the litigation would be where I would put my favor.
You've got the attorney in the state of Vermont, who's the most passionate about cannabis, right here. I mean, no matter what you do, Silverman's going to be litigating, so.
yeah, well, here's the question, he's already got a shop
Right,
over
and he's
here.
already got a
Is he
shop.
gonna litigate to open up downtown? We'll see what kind of person that is. That's different.
That's what he said in the planning commission hearing, that he felt that it was unfair that he was the first person in.
okay.
And,
Good on him.
I'll keep my mouth shut, I feel like I'm making it worse for you.
So,
No.
let me just clarify then. So we've got a couple things for you to go back and look at.
Yeah, a couple easy things.
Well, and what if we say, so this one, you could go back and do any more digging, any more fact finding or anything. If at the next time we meet on this, we decide we want to pull that out, and we want to pull that out, would that change?
It would cost you another month, unfortunately.
Because
it would be a
we're gonna pull it out, we have to pull it out now.
Well, no, I mean, you can pull it out anytime you want, but if you pull it out at the next hearing, then that'll be a substantial change. You'll need to hold another hearing after that, which
So
will,
we need to make up our mind on this right now.
yeah, maybe what you're deciding is that this is just a bigger issue than we can do.
Another process question. Let's say that we have a couple downtown cannabis stores and it does change character, people don't feel good about it. Can we ratchet back our opt-in through public process? The answer you can say no.
There's something about what we can,
You can put it to a second vote.
you put it to second vote, yeah.
Okay, so we can like say, oh, guess what, we're not a retail cannabis store.
Can you shut down the town?
I don't know.
I don't know, can you shut down stores?
That,
No,
that-
once they're here.
I
Once
don't-
they're here.
I think that would be opening the door for the
Okay,
tax
yes,
bill.
but it is.
You sound like us. Welcome to Harville, right, PC? I mean, it's just such a big, convoluted issue. There's so much more to explore and learn about it. I guess maybe, I guess when we put it in there, we just felt like, oh geez, the select board gave us a charge at the time of the opt-in vote, and we gotta like take some kind of crack at it, but it turned out to be a bigger creature than we realized.
So let the select board.
Yeah, we did. That's what we did.
So if we leave it in like it is, the risk is that we might get sued.
Well, the first item
But-
they would do would be to petition against it. Is that correct?
That would be, yeah, very soon.
If we approve the changes and leave in the prohibition from the downtown, we're not talking about immediate litigation. The process would first start with a petition of the citizens to change the zoning or no?
So you would be somebody that wanted to cite a business in the downtown, someone filing a suit on their behalf. If there was, if you're talking about what the next step would be, again, is there a citizen's petition if people are not happy with the zoning bylaw as a.
Yeah, I don't know, I'd have to look into that, if we can appeal the whole bylaw amendment. But, like John was saying behind me, they also have legal recourse to just, bring suit against the town in general.
An individual who feels he's lost the opportunity to compete in the marketplace, he almost puts.
I would say that a second risk, Dan, like there's a whole legal risk, and then the second risk is if you keep it in there and you go to another hearing, then, you could end up having more people show up at that hearing, and then you could end up like really compromising your schedule, which will compromise getting the NDA incentive in time for somebody to make their construction schedule. So that would be a sad thing to lose all of our affordable housing progress.
Wow.
I hear your argument on that, but I also don't wanna take the cannabis conversation lightly because we may bump Summit's construction schedule, like, I understand, but let's take the time we need to make whatever decision we think is best. And if that bumps Summit a little bit, then so be it, but if we can make a decision tonight, then we're all set.
Maybe it's not my place to make a recommendation or a request, but if my dream came true, you guys would just take it out for now and deal with it separately. Take the public input you need, get the legal advice you need, see how this pans out across the way, and then do another round of bylaw edits to deal with the cannabis issue on its own.
Separately.
Yeah.
So if we
Just-
take it out, what does that mean for any practical terms?
It means that would be a substantial change, and your next meeting on August 9th would be a public hearing. And then you'd have an item on your agenda right after the public hearing to adopt the bylaw, so it wouldn't compromise the progress really.
Right now, I meant, what does that mean for cannabis? If we're
Sorry?
not regulating it?
Not regulated.
We would not regulate it.
Right.
Right. But in the meantime, before we get something on the books, okay, but there'll be no constraint on that particular type of business, so if somebody wanted to jump in there, yeah, they could.
It'd be exactly be treated the way it is now, like a retail.
So right now, in the proposed zoning, cannabis retail is conditional use in highway and mixed use. And we're talking about whether it should also be allowed in CB as conditional.
Right,
That's the question.
that's the strip that goes from the Congregational Church to the traffic circle.
And so the change is just changing it from excluded to conditional use in that one district.
I mean, it's up to you if you, how many
Okay.
districts you
Just
want to
making sure we know what the
Right.
changes that we're discussing. And conditional use means development review, look at all the factors that they have available.
We also have a hand up by Elise Shannon. We have a hand up by Elise.
Hi, Elise.
Oh, sorry, I'm very back, but can you hear me?
Yes.
I can myself, so yes, you can hear me. I just want to point out that it really isn't just an issue for Summit and that parcel if these regs get delayed. It's something for the Addison County Community Trust too. I think you have sellers right now, or rather potential sellers who might be listing their property that could be developable, that could stimulate more housing development, but people are in a very wait and see mode right now with these regulations. And obviously, if the select board feels like, you know, the cannabis issue is one that needs to be revisited, then so be it. But I just think that you should be aware that there is a cost to housing development across the board, not just for Summit. And I would encourage you to adopt these regulations and then try to treat the cannabis separately so that we can move forward with trying to develop more housing in Middlebury.
Well, it's not adopting these regulations, it's changing the cannabis regulations. Because if we adopt the regulations as you presented now,
Right, what she's talking about is stay on our timeline.
we had to make a correction.
So why don't we do this, if the board will support this, we pull out the campus. If we're gonna move the greater package forward, a couple minors that you can get back to us. We'll warn the second hearing. And we're gonna ask you to do some more research and come back to us immediately on what your recommendation is on the campus. Separate, standalone. Amendment to the zone.
Yeah, we'll get that on our PC agenda straight away.
Second,
So how would that amendment work? What would be the process for that amendment?
same with what we're doing now.
So that means that currently it would be as all other retail, which is the underlying existing zoning. And we will consider a specific cannabis retail use soon.
What would be the timeline? I mean, what I'm saying is if in a month, if we come up and say we're gonna limit it, what is it?
That's the big deal about it. It's taking the contentious portion, go on the rest of all this good work that's being done, out of it. And separate, so you have two actions, one that can stand alone, pass through, and won't get shot down, and then one that we will address independently. And we will seek some public input and see if the public is, what the public is supporting, what do they think. I think get John Flowers to write, John's watching anyways. John, we need you to write an article about how the select board is conflicted and wants to know what the town's opinion is on it. Wow.
I like that, Brian.
So Dan, being that the select board is conflicted, I think I would probably advise the planning commission to give you something similar to what you're seeing tonight. So that once it's warned by the select board, then any new incoming applications need to be reviewed under both sets of regulations with the more stringent set taking precedent. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
And then that gives you the chance to have as many public hearings as you want and like invite anybody in and just take your time, like getting input, so that you don't feel like you're carrying the weight of seven shoulders. Support each other.
Just makes a lot of sense.
It does.
You guys support that?
Yes.
Okay. Get your marks and orders. Yeah, you got everything you want.
Oh, yeah, I'm very happy.
So, if there are no further comments, comments regarding the zoning bylaw amendment. I'm going to call the public hearing closed at 8:36. Thank you all for your thoughtful participation.
So we got the easiest thing done, now we're gonna move on.
Okay, thank you. That's very good. Next, Brad and Eugene, please. So,
Nick all by himself can make a select-board meeting about 3 hours long.
I'm trying to remember a time when the meeting never went long. I can't offhand remember.
So I asked these three to join us this evening and give us an update. So that the board had an update on a number of different things. As you know, the board asked Nick to represent us on the master planning process, and Eugene is representing the Airport Association. And Nick have been working on a separate but parallel process, which was to try to improve communications and make it so that things flowed a little better between the V-Trans group, the airport, the neighbors, and the town, so that we all had shared vision and picture of what was going on when things were happening. So I asked them to, we just got done last week, the first round presentation from the consultant and V-Trans on the master planning. I see some familiar faces that attended that here. And so I wanted the ones that had been the designated reps to come and share their observations and thoughts with the board. So, thank you.
Okay, well, just to first answer a couple of questions. Yes, it is good to see all of you. Selectman Middlebury, you look much better there than I ever did, and Selectwoman Esther, I hope he's treating you better.
We both agree.
What about me?
And just to point out a little digression, just purchased today 2 seats on train 290 and train 290 from Middlebury to New York.
I heard that was a little difficult to do today.
It actually, the website did not function as well as it should have, but certainly calling them, they have an arrangement with a party bank, and the agent did within 10 minutes, and it was a smooth, seamless purchase.
Perfect.
So I guess we'll see all of you on the train.
Yes.
Okay, great. It's such a long time coming. I sit back and think how long we'll be talking about that. And, it's here. So anyway, got my notes here. As you know, I always want to write things down. So I have this to sort of keep somewhat of a linear thought process and be assisted by good friends, Fred and Eugene, who have been helping as we've gone through this town rep study and master plan process. So I'm going to give you a brief update on the master plan for Middlebury State Airport. And it's an ongoing dialogue. It's been right along, constant communication, various technical advisory committee meetings that we've been on, participating in, and communications as well with, besides that, with V-Trans and with consultants. So, as you know, you've appointed Eugene Roy to be a technical advisory committee member representing the Middlebury Neighborhood Airport Association, which goes by the acronym MANA, and that was a wise decision. Been the one who's been receiving and fielding many of the questions, putting it into a unified format to be able to present it onto V-Trans, and Prem has been aiding with that great dialogue with the MANA community. That was a good decision. As you pointed me to be a town representative on the TAC, and I suppose the jury is still out as to whether that was a good decision or not. But if I say something in error, stupid, you're partially blamed for that. So anyway, just a little bit of description. The Vermont Agency of Transportation, or V-Trans, is in the process of updating the airport master plan for Middlebury State Airport, which goes by its federal designation 6 for all Louisiana. Airports have these various designations. And this is something that's required by the Federal Aviation Administration on a regular basis. And that's used to establish critical, immediate, and then long-term needs for the airport. The last time this was done, one of the critical needs identified was improving the safety of the runway and taxiways. And that was, once it was in the master plan, that moved into the federal procurement cycle for critical, and the runway was in fact enhanced to a safer point. And there is no plan going forward to expand that runway. It's in good condition right now. It's safe, it's proper for the category of airplanes that fly in and out of here, and there's no intention to change that. So, and in airports, you know, this process for airports is not that different from what happens with other parts of the transportation network, such as roads, railroads, waterways. They all go through this planning process, and whereby you know, the respective regulatory agency can then determine what is needed to go forward. And they're all following under, every transport mechanism follows under the professional standards and regulations of the overseeing agency. So again, the FAA is the overseeing agency. And they establish the calculating methodologies that are used by various consulting teams to establish things such as traffic flow and projected growth or decline in usage and operating procedures. So that's going on. To let you know, basically, this airport is a local general aviation. It serves private, small aircraft. They're either individually owned or corporate owned. We have some corporations that use their aircraft for their business purposes. It also sees things such as periodic air taxi service, bringing people who are associated with businesses here, Green Mountain Beverage, in case in point where a taxi may come in periodically and bring in some of their distributors for that. Flight training has been done here in the past. It's not currently done at this point, but that is something that could occur. There's periodic angel flights where pilots donate their time to come in and transport, you know, critically ill individuals, those who need specialized medical transport to a more advanced center for that. And it has a huge role as a maintenance airport. And it has for many, many years continued as such, and will be visioned as among the uses in the future. There is no commercial service in the airport, nor is there any intention to bring that. We have a major airport to the north of Burlington, a smaller commercial airport at Rutland to the south. There would be no economic reason to change it. So it will stay as its general aviation airport. And that's what the master plan is built on. The master plan is in draft stages, and we've had various technical advisory committee meetings. The 30th of June, we had the most recent first of the public hearings on the draft. Heather was there, Brian was there, and we were there. And what's emerging in this recommendations will be upgrading navigational equipment for safer operations and extended operating periods. There's various devices they use to, one is a precision approach guide, which is essentially a small box that helps the pilots determine if they're too high, too low, too right, left. So as they're lining up for the runway, there's some GPS improvements that are being examined. Lighting has been discussed, and I don't think that has fully been finalized. Most recently heard is not in the current recommendation by the consulting group, but it is something that is still constantly requested. Additional hangars for aircraft storage and for the maintenance needs of the airport is being requested. There are businesses that depend on their airplanes here, and for them to be able to house these aircraft in a weather-tight environment is beneficial. There's discussion of a terminal facility, and as I say, there's no commercial airport, but I'll get into that a little bit as to what that means. It's basically a pilot rest area and a ready area. So this is where pilots who come in here, either those who start out of here can do their flight preparation, pre-flight training, and those who are transient, maybe coming through, can do things, everything from use the restroom to duck in from weather conditions or just rest. So that's some there, on it. So then, again, with this short a lot of time, I'm not gonna get into details of master plan, it's complex, it's a voluminous document. And it is on V-Trans website, and it will change. If any of you have specific comments you would like presented to V-Trans, then please present them, make sure that they get through. So, and the plan is to complete this master plan on about the end of the year. It's coming up on the field. When was that? Oh, about the end of the year. It's a bit of a dynamic day, John, but that's what they're aiming for, because they want to get this done as soon as possible. So we have this technical advisory committee group. It is representatives, Eugene, myself, representing all of you, and V-Trans and consultants. Now, Eugene has been the one specifically, more than anything, working with that group. He's done an outstanding job with that. But we recognize too, because again, the select board, we all know that represent the community as a whole. So we want to make sure, and I always found personally it was best to understand as many viewpoints as possible as I know you do. So while we have Nana, who's been very involved and vocal in issues here, we also have to recognize that there are those Middlebury residents who live in the area, around, not far from the airport, but have chosen not to be a part of Nana, or for whatever reason are not a part. There's many of those people. Also recognition that it is part of Middlebury's economy. And so therefore we need to get some input from the community, the broader community. And then of course those who rely on the airport for their life. So we wanted to make sure that we had a good balance of input, and we're not hearing just exclusively one viewpoint versus others. So we work everything we can to be broader. So the MANA meetings, Eugene and I and Clem has been very, very helpful on this, have been invaluable. We have some really good communicators here. We've been able to gain understanding as to many of the concerns they're presenting, including what the impact of navigation lanes would be, or what the impact of anchors would be, or a terminal, or adding traffic could be on there. One of the things we heard early on was that V-Trans was not communicating. And I recall having those conversations years ago before we did the bridge project. But then things changed at a later point, the bridge project. Prem will speak more to that, but I think what we've observed is it's not so much a matter of V-Trans communication and not doing that well. And Michelle Bloomhauer and the staff has done, they've demonstrated good effort to make sure communication's out. I think what we recognized early on is the issue appeared to be one not necessarily communicating the way it was being communicated. I run into this quite often in my own professional life, where I'm dealing with consultants who are quite good at what they do. And they have a target audience that they're focusing on, but they don't recognize that there's multiple audiences. So what they often encounter is a situation where they're speaking in vernacular, they're speaking in acronyms that to those who are in the business, they understand. But to those who are outside of it, we're very smart people and are part of the whole decision-making process, that these terms become foreign. So we focused part of our communication on getting to the point where the consultants would recognize that their audience is broader than just the FAA. Now the FAA is certainly a prime, because that's for the purpose of this project. But that in fact, they also need to be able to speak in manners that are understood by the broader community. Give you an example, is lighting. Lighting has come up as something that's caused a lot of consternation. And for one who's not familiar with airport options, but has been exposed to lighting through large commercial airports, you think, my God, they're going to put Logan Airport on. You know, with constant lights, a lot of them all the time, and really change the impact of the area. But in fact, there are other options, and for a small general aviation airport, it tends to be what's called pilot activated lighting. It's normally dark, the pilot is approaching, requests the lights come on, they come on for a brief time, long enough for the pilot to land, and then they go on. And the lights are targeted toward the pilot, not across the ground. So that was something that, once we started having those conversations, people started to understand, okay, this does not seem to be as horrific as I thought it would be. Terminal, again, we hear terminal, I think commercial flights, and that's a legitimate concern when you first heard that. But as we've had these communications with many people, it seems to subside many of things. So I would say they've all gone away, but they have. One of the others, when you look at, this is a classic consultant way of approaching things, engineering consultants specifically, is they'll say, okay, the standard, they'll start off with what the standard allows. And if you do that, just in the runway issue alone, the dimension of this runway after 2017 improvement, by FAA standards, can handle 97 airplanes an hour. Now that's more than both. And so when you sit back and you think, okay, I understand where some of the concerns will come, but then when you read further into the document and they do some evaluation based on some FAA guidelines, you find that in fact, still talking maybe 1 to 2 an hour. And that's a peak time. If you go out there at the airport, certain days you may not see anything for several hours, and other days you may see a higher volume. But average over a year, it's going to be in the vicinity of 1 to 2 takeoffs an hour. So, you know, those were many of the things that we felt was important to, one, get an understanding of, and two, to make sure that the consultants presented such. And I would say that Eugene and I experienced a technical advisory committee that was sort of a run through in preparation for the last public hearing that happened. And I think they paid more attention to this. And so when we had the public hearing, I believe they were able to communicate to a broader audience, recognizing these were all smart people in this room who had an interest in what they were doing, and that they weren't just talking to those who understood their vernacular solely. So when we spoke with the Manna Group, also one of the things that we recognized that there were several people that many of us know them for years who live in that area who were not participating. We tried to reach out and get some input to what their thoughts were. Many of them were people who had constructed those houses up in the area up on the hill behind there. Several living in the village of East Middlebury. And by and large, what was fascinating is we did not hear an objection to the airport. I thought that was kind of interesting, universal across, is they said, we know the airport's there, but one person said to me, I'd rather, you know, to me, I really have more concern being on 116 with some of the heavy trucks going on. And so there just was not anything that overwhelmingly said, we don't want this airport here, or we don't want it. They're quite comfortable the way it is. And it's dynamic. It has had varying levels of takeoffs and landings. Actually, prior to 2017 was a higher average because of one of the businesses that was out there at the time. I want to put one thing to rest that still came up twice in a conversation with others, is that we're okay with the airport, but we do not, we've heard that Munson Road was going to be closed for runway extension. This went back, I remember hearing this back in 2015, 2016. It was never in a plan to do that, but somehow it was a rumor that started and sometimes took on its own life. So I can say categorically, Munson Road's not going to be closed and they're not extending the runway. The runway is what it is and will not change for ad infinitum. Certainly it's master plan. I reached out to some of the residents outside the immediate area because again, it's part of Middlebury's economy, just like industrial park is, just like the auto dealers and the retail sectors are, just like counties. And it ranged from ambivalence about it to I don't have anything negative to say about it. Several people said, well, I know people worked out there. One interesting story is one local resident, his daughter became interested in aircraft years ago. Spent a fair bit of time out there as a child. Ultimately, she became one of the first women captains in Frontier Airlines. So it's kind of one of those local stories. But by and large, I would say the residents had no real negative feelings, or were often feelings one way or another toward the airport. And then there are those who depend on it for its economic livelihood. And you know, again, when you look at what the master plan is going to do, it's going to essentially continue more of the same. General aviation, maintenance, you some of the examples of, and maintenance is a very critical role that it does play. It's one of these airports that is kind of out of the mainstream, so it becomes, Burlington, for example, doesn't really want more of these type of facilities there because it takes up valuable real estate for what a major airport like that should do. It actually fills a pretty nice role as a place where a plane can come in at some point of the week, be serviced and go out, whether it's that rest of sometime that week or 2 or 3 months later, depending on the extent of work. It first became a maintenance airport. You go back in history, back around 1975, when a guy named Jack Downey started to jump down aviation. It was seasonal until '85, at which point Jack expanded. He had 23 employees out there doing heavy maintenance at the time, including for a regional airline that was known as Commuter. We had 48 airplanes that used to fly regionally under the banners for U.S. Air Continental. And so he had these employees, part of the community, doing the service on this type of aircraft. At that time, they were running around 10,000 landing operations a year. Jack ultimately retired, closed the business down, sold it to a guy named Bill Ham, who had a company called Great Avionics. Another business out there is J&M Aviation, with a guy named Mike Vincent, who does general maintenance on aircraft. Had 17 employees before COVID hit, now he has 4, but he's business coming back. His specialty is actually painting, so it's not unusual to find an aircraft in the Caribbean with an airline out there being painted, and he does those kind of specialty services. And then the other I mentioned was Bill Ham for Green Avionics, who his primary emphasis is on installing safety systems, communications, navigation into airplanes. He's a local guy. He grew up in Bristol, went off into the military, worked for some aircraft manufacturers in Southern California, came back to start this business, started himself. He now has 10 employees, which is an interesting group there because some of them are young people who grew up here, were able to get training in the field of aviation, are getting further training working for Bill, and they said if we didn't have this opportunity, we would have to be here. We've got others who have moved into the area. So he's right now, he's one of those people that looks at the hangar aspect of the master plan, says, I need more so that I can continue to serve my customers well. On the sideline is he was working last week for a customer in Guyana, or Ghana, so his reach is rather far. So we have that, and then there are people such as Sean Flynn, who has Silver Maple Construction. He actually supports 12 to 25 of his employees seasonally, depending, taking them to different construction projects around the Northeast. And then they're able to, they're local, they're able to afford good jobs. So again, it's a moving process, but we want to make sure that the various stakeholders are represented, the boards get in, so that this master plan is something that comes out that's palatable for the community as a whole. And there will be another public hearing coming on. There's more technical advisory meetings that we will have next week. And so if there's immediate items or questions you'd like to inject it in, now's the time to get that in. But we are moving forward, and I feel we're moving in a good way. And I'd like to have, at this point, Gene, have their
Thanks. Like Nick, I'm happy to see all of you, although I'm not so sure about my friend Farhan. Yesterday, the day before, we had a phone conversation, and I initially didn't recognize his voice, and he let me have it. I'm a little intimidated, right? All right. I want to speak just very briefly on 2 issues that I've been involved in. The first is as the communication liaison between MANA and V-Trans and hence the select board. I'm one of the founding members of MANA. I'm actually the one who came up with the title and the acronym. I live a couple hundred yards from the airport, so I do have a lot of skin in the game. one of our major concerns was that we had the opportunity as a community surrounding the airport to receive timely and accurate information from V-Trans. So we know what's going on. And I'd have to say, really, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that's been accomplished. Michelle Boomhauer has been extraordinary. She is an exemplary professional, and she's followed through on everything she said she's going to do. We currently have monthly meetings established with representatives of V-Trans, MANA, and the town. Michelle is responsible for compiling the minutes of those meetings and ensuring that they're presented on the town website. In addition, she's taken on the responsibility to ensure that all information related to airport operations and development are posted on the V-Trans website and with Kathleen's help on the town website. Secondly, the master plan itself. It's somewhat of a difficult document for a layperson to labor through. But with enough diligence, it is comprehensive. And I would like to clearly state that when we gathered in the winter as a neighbors association and identified the major issues that concerned us, they have all been addressed to our satisfaction in the master plan. Very briefly, we were concerned that the airport would be developed and expanded into an airport no longer consistent with what we understand as a neighborhood and the community airport. The master plan details that the airport is sustaining its B1 classification, which essentially means its priority is to serve very small aircraft. Secondly, we were concerned about runway extension because this rumor of an additional extension and the closure of Munson Road had been floating around. Now we know in the master plan there is no runway extension. Third major item was lights. As Nick pointed out, and you can include me in this, when I heard lights, I pictured, lights at an airport and beacons and Logan. Well, it turns out that that's not the case, and that the only lights being proposed are unobtrusive and pilot operated, and what's the name of the device?
It goes under the acronym of PAPI, which is a precision instrument something.
Yeah, which seems like a valid means of ensuring pilot safety, and the lights that are emanated are not visible from the ground. So what more could we ask for? Finally, there were environmental concerns, particularly the purity and the protection of the aquifer. And again, being a layperson, when you hear, I'll speak for myself, when I heard that the town's water supply is under the airport, I didn't know what that meant. And it took a lot of diligence, it took a lot of education by speaking to people outside of my immediate circle and learning that for all intents and purposes, the aquifer is protected. And I think that concern should be laid to rest. The only other thing I'd like to add is that I think I speak for all of the residents, and we appreciate the diligence and your assistance in setting up these communication protocols. And thank you. And I'd also encourage you to, if you have the time, to speak with business owners. They've been invaluable to me for expanding my sense of what a community airport means, how avionics functions in a small airport, and the value of small businesses at an airport. You'll hear from us, but they may not be as proactive as we are. So I suppose on behalf of them, I'm encouraging you to seek their input.
And certainly, if you wish to have a tour, and see what goes on out there, that could certainly be. We actually had Senator Harding, yesterday came out, visited the airport, spent very good time with Bill Hammond, saw his operation, got to meet some of the people. These young people who've been able to stay here, and where they grew up, and the young people who were able to move here, setting down the future of this area. And so it was very informative. Her understanding of it, and she was able to express certainly some of the concerns that she's had. So that could be set up with that. Eugene?
Yes, well, both these guys basically said everything I was gonna say, so I'm not gonna repeat it. But there's one last thing that's not really part of the master plan yet, but the businesses, we went down and we visited as a group, talking to both of the people there. It is about, the berm. A berm and a spot where the plane goes in, but they do all the river that went in, it's called an R.
Basically it's a blend on there now, but it's essentially before an airplane takes off, it's a run. And it's where they make sure things function, because you don't want to start taking off and have your parking. Everything. So they go through this. So it's a noise abatement issue, is that, and Eugene's been very strong in endorsing that, and that we're seeing a broad array of ideas that start to be evaluated.
Yeah, even the meeting that we had last time with the people doing up the master plan, they even brought it up. It's something that said they've done it to a lot of other airports. A lot of other airports do have the urn system set up there. It keeps the neighborhood association a hell of a lot better. And it's not asking for a lot, it's not a big deal. It's not really in plans yet, but I want the town of Middlebury. Everything else is pretty much straightforward, the way you said it, he said it. And, it's nice meeting the business people and everything. They're all good people, and they know their neighbors. So it's not like too bad. It's not like that.
That's great. Yeah.
So, I thank all you guys for listening and see if we can get something done.
Do we have any questions of the three of them?
I have one. And maybe a follow-up on that. So, thank Nick and Eugene. Thanks for the opening. We can't bring this on you. I mean, it's all like this. But move this with you. I had a question, but we didn't talk much about it. When I met with you at MBA's house, we talked about the placement of the hangars. I wasn't under the impression that they were negotiable. When we met with Brian and we talked about that also. It's still the same case.
It is still the same case. And this is one of the things where sometimes consultants get a little ahead of some consultants. And I don't think there was as much communication with them initially with the users. So there's a need for hangers out there. So, in fact, if you talk to people who are familiar with the airport who operate, that's probably the number one thing to say. It's for guys like Sean Flynn being able to keep his aircraft ice protected so that it's effective in the summer. And of course, people who businesses who have the means to do that. So what happened with this consulting group is they said, okay, we need X square feet of land, 50,000 square feet. So it's almost like a monopoly exercise. They started spotting geometric shapes around the field. Now, what that does is there tends to be two primary areas where they're going to be. One is over in the area of yours in Andy's house that they showed up, and one is toward the south end of Nashville. What they're really doing at that point is they're trying to get a pre-permit for a quantity of hangars. Now, they will go through the Act 250 review, all the water quality, all the things like that that are done. But then before anything can be built, first of all, there would have to be somebody coming forward saying, I want to build a hangar. Just to make it clear, the state does not build these hangars. It's like that are on these land on airports. At that point, they would have to put a clear argument as to why they need that and space. And then it would go for, as I understand, a secondary review, at which point it could be approved or rejected in a certain location. And in fact, actually, the point, I don't know if I brought that up, is actually the largest hangar they showed public is, if you talk to the business out there, is in the least desirable location. Because it's a maintenance size hangar, but it's in an area where individual airplanes are. When you talk to the people who are in the maintenance business, they say, I'd like that hangar, but I'd like it right next to my others. And which is in an area that is where there's tons of hangars. So yes, that does become negotiable, and nothing is cast.
So the follow-up question is, I see in this report where Act 250 amendment has been submitted for the hangars. So it is not site specific, it is just a general Act 250.
It is, I understand, the general Act 250 to put X square foot hangars there, along with navigation.
I'm actually surprised that they are even consider that location for a hangar, which is compared to the north of everything else. Like Bill have said that it doesn't make sense for you to have a hangar that far.
Yes, and that's been part of the aspect of getting better communication even among users, because I was lacking there as well. It's now better, but certainly in talking to the businesses who are there, it's not right. You know, that's the smaller ones over there. Oh, that would be basically launch. So yes, but they're negotiable. But they're trying to look out 20 years of what could. I appreciate you saying that.
Yes, sir.
I would like to take you up on your offer day. I would love to visit the airport.
Okay. Well, we could set that up, whether it's individual or all that. Sign up to it.
You're gonna raise a flag, so.
Well, if we get a flight, I can fly the
I
plane.
actually want the side perks of this kid. We'll have to, eventually, it's going to be, like Senator Hardy said yesterday, a view of the whole thing that Bill had. So I think it's important for you to understand actually how the operations work here, what pilots do, and you know, how the traffic patterns work, so you can see it, understand what those are running and all that. And Bill said to me, you want to walk for the ride too? It's like, yes, I am. So it was very invaluable, I think, for her to understand, not just for this airport, but for the transportation system in general, as to how they work and the protocols that people who fly airplanes are pretty regimented bunch, because if they're not, then they don't get to be able to do that.
This report is fantastic. It sounds like V-Trans has really improved their understanding inclusion and really cleared up a lot of things. And this is just such a better stance than the one that we were presented with when this came to our attention. And it just feels great on the side of things.
I'm reminded back again, having history on the board, when we were the bridge project early on, no pun intended with the train. You know, there was communication, we felt like we were almost being brought in this second tier, and then they brought in the 18. And things happened well, and I feel that, we have an 18 on this one. And they are committed to doing things well.
What was nice there too, when we went and visited people down there and talked about, both the businesses down there understood that there are neighbors.
Sure.
They did. And they're the one that says, yeah, a lot of places do have runoff areas. Why? It's because it's sitting there. I know it's an airport there, but yes, there's a community.
Mm-hmm.
They seem to be respectful of who we are. At least that's what I gathered when I left there.
Yeah.
Which was a good start, and I think V-Trans did come on.
Okay, well, I appreciate you guys for your efforts on behalf of everybody to try to ensure we have some better communications. This is not something that is done by any means. It's something that we have to continue to work on. I still think that there's a couple hanging chads that we need to work on. If there's a way to get the consultant to approve and make recommendations of any of the firms, I think would be a great win. And I have decided I'm going to use myself from the Act 250 process so that I can represent the town and some of this reconfiguration. I think the best time we're going to try to get them to shift where that large hangar is. I think it's in that Act 250 process. And so I think those are kind of our two hanging chads as I see it. I am very aware that they have a lot of oversight. I've heard for years about the concern about the water contamination for aquifer, and so reached out to somebody who actually knows something about it. So, I think this is part of my requirement to educate myself. And that aquifer is kind of like Lake Dunmore. I always pictured Fern Lake right underneath the airport. It's more like Lake Dunmore. It's got tons of houses over it. It's got East Middlebury over it. You got gas stations. You got all kinds of stuff that is much more likely to move that aquifer than an airport that gets inspected pretty closely and doesn't have very tanks. So that gave me a sense of solace that isn't the greatest risk that will pose to our community. So I think sometimes people grab onto these things as scare tactics. And we really have an obligation to understand the issues addressed by the greater community. So, but I think there's still a couple things we really need to work hard on. See if we can turn the corner on those. And I really appreciate you guys coming tonight, filling us in on where you're at. I thought that the presentation, I had a sick wife at home. I had to get home and get her dinner. So I stepped out before the end of it. But I thought the presentation, that consultant, I was really impressed with its professionalism. I wish they presented everything first. Some of those comments were really dragged it on over stuff that I think I could have used my time a little better. But the presentation is in our packet. Go through that presentation piece by piece, and we'll look at it and understand what they're recommending. So thank you very much.
Okay, those two points you brought up, we're going to be bringing out the next technical advice. Those are critical points.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Good. Yeah, it is good to see you all.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, yeah. I'll be heading away for a week as soon as possible.
All due respect to Dan, I am not joining you.
You're trying.
It's like going up in a pickup. All right, so good luck.
So I've been going to bed at like 9. You guys are having a marathon. Nice to see you.
That's the kind of room where you still.
I know. I guess nobody cares about the block party. That's okay.
Okay, I'll be there.
Well, they do. Do you want me to wait for Unity Farmhouse?
That's out.
So, just quickly, Rebecca and I
They're
went
not leaking. Those airports are not providing any pollution. It's above ground tanks. They're protected.
So happy,
They're all in ours.
and I think this is better the Where's Walmart thing, it's just been a favorite.
So fun.
So,
It's so simple.
like, and we were like, oh, we can come back.
Yeah.
We ended up going to, I think we got to.
Wow.
In
Out of what is there something?
Just before our break.
every place in there, I found something.
So that's
So much,
that's perfect.
so much,
Those were huge,
so
that's like probably a
That
small.
was like, we're not shopping, we're looking for all that.
States.
So
That's
this
the
has
exact
to be
intention.
I think.
No pouring motor oil in your yard.
I think it's such a fabulous
Please feel free
program.
to-
I just, you know.
Yeah.
I
got it.
Go in the stores
Yeah.
and you are looking around the stores, at what the stores have while you're looking for what.
And inevitably, they have something that you didn't
I do want to move on here.
realize. Yes. I'm kidding. Okay, so, block party application for, permit application for August 4th. So this does look a little bit different than block parties that we've done in the past. I actually just had somebody ask me if the block parties coming back. And I was like, honestly, events are not back in the sense that we're not really trying to recreate what was pre-COVID here. We're really sort of continually adapting. And in this instance, the market has been going so well. Our last one on Thursday night was absolutely incredible. We had 41 vendors, I think, and hundreds of people. And it was really, it has turned into our vision in the beginning was, 12 to 15 vendors set up on that space and, kind of farmers market-esque, people kind of stroll through and it's sort of a slow progression through the 4 hours, and it has really turned into essentially a festival every week in terms of the number of people and how much people love it. And so, because it is a lot of work and because it's going so well, I felt like it made a lot of sense to combine the block party with the market. And so we're gonna just what we're proposing is to close off just the section of street that's adjacent, and that's really specifically because of safety. So I really didn't want to have a full market going on in Triangle Park and then the rest of the block party happening where you had to cross the road into Triangle. So what we're proposing doing is just closing off that section between Merchants Row and the post office, but to try to maintain access for the posting to get in and out. And so I just want to block that piece off, and that's what we'll do the dunk tank. I'm actually working with a vendor to bring in mini golf. So there'd be a few mini golf, I think we're gonna do 3 6-hole courses on the street, and other kids' activities and games. And then we'll have the market going on, we'll have music in the gazebo, which was what we've been doing for the market already. We're gonna do 2 bands instead of 1. So it'll be from 4 to 6 and 6 to 8. So, I think just kind of expands what it is that we're doing, spills it out into the street a little bit to give it that kind of fun festival-y feel. We'll still have a lot of food, and just bring in a little bit more in terms of activities. So that's what I'm proposing for this year's block party, and how that evolves as we come out of COVID. If that ever happens, then we'll see. But that's what it felt like was kind of the right, path forward for the event for right now.
That's so good. I got a quick process question, I can do that.
Yeah.
You're here at 9:30.
Yeah.
This is something that I think it's great to have you here, it's great to have you here while we're discussing zoning and the downtown, all these things. But I think that things like this, we could.
I just said that for we
Right,
put
like-
these things at the beginning.
It's great to know about it, but I don't know that you're reaching a bunch of people by being here.
Right.
And I don't know if it's the best way to communicate with you guys.
Yeah, the question really is it something that we would have questions about when we're shutting down the full downtown? It's a little different. It's borderline consent agenda.
Yeah, okay.
If I knew everybody who was in it had a consent agenda, people may have questions about the safety.
Yeah.
It's not quite as cut and dried as the mid-market, where they're just But then again, she was supposed to be on at 8:00.
Oh, I know, that's what I was saying, but, yeah.
Well, when I saw Nick on the agenda before me, I asked him, I was here for a minute.
I really feel like, I'm sorry, but I really feel like at this point, we all know, we need to all quick first.
Yeah.
You come in and
Yeah,
get
yeah.
it done.
I don't know, there's been times I've been known to talk, Lindsay.
No,
The other thing I would just say is that I have been in touch with, Tri-Valley, and they are talking about how they can deviate for that section of time. I don't envision any other issues, but I will be, just communicating with, Shushan, family, just making sure that they're aware. We're doing this, much, truncated kind of version of this, and we're not doing the sod this year, so, I don't envision really any issues coming up, but it'll just be, it's part of the process.
I was looking for that sign.
I know.
that was so cool.
I know, and we may get it again at some point, but they already had been booked for next month, so.
Okay,
I'll move to approve a public assemblage permit for the Better Middlebury Partnerships Block Party on August 4th, 2022, sorry.
I don't wanna go back there.
I know, sorry.
all in favor, signify by saying
It's
aye.
past my
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, good night, guys.
Thanks for coming.
Aaron, if you need a giant Connect Four, we have one.
I'll borrow that, I'll email you, thank you.
Does Jen stay around or is she dialed in or?
Quit.
Okay,
I think that's what she's over here.
she is still there.
Okay, I'll tell her
Anybody
we
else
have.
return for?
Michelle?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Sorry to interrupt the ring, but her two things together. This was for me.
Yeah, but no, it's,
Dante.
it's hard to anticipate, how long things are gonna take sometimes.
Yeah.
Jen, we all wanna know, have you been productive in between the two?
My two presentations?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely, I'm in deep with John Tenney up
Okay,
there.
there we
Gonna
go.
return in a second.
I was trying to advocate for you to always be back to back, but now you just blew it, so now.
I get paid double, right, for the two things at the same time?
She was tomorrow off, being there all night.
Okay, then. About the, local hazard mitigation plan.
Yep.
Contract.
Right, so here tonight to ask you to approve the hiring of Scene to do the local hazard mitigation plan. Our local hazard mitigation plan is, needs to be updated every once in a while, and ours is overdue right now. So we're excited to be jumping on it right away. She can start right away, July 15 is her start date, and she would, you can see in the notes, she would have it done, beginning next year. We had a response from Addison County Regional Planning as well. And you can see in my memo that, yeah, sometimes it's good to keep people separate and it allows them to talk. And as Brian knows from being a chair, right, you get hampered and burdened sometimes when you have to be chair and you have to be the consultants, so now I think Andrew will be able to speak freely and the Conservation Commission will be able to weigh in freely and we'll have a separate consultant managing the process. So let's try it that way if you guys agree.
You got a grant for most of it.
Yes.
Questions? Pleasure of the board.
I move to award contract to Seam Solutions to perform an update for the town's local hazard mitigation plan and the total cost of $7,425.
Second. More time, any questions? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thanks, Jen.
Audit my list.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have those
Quite a-
hearings at the same
quite a
time as our
to-do
cannabis
list
hearings.
you
Lots of public input. Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, Kathleen, going to go through the EIDC's budget.
Yes, so the EIDC met in June and recommended a budget target of $33,233 for the board's consideration, which would include projects that they've already identified, a power source for Triangle Park events, to facilitate vendors having access to power, and a pilot project Mill Street, even with a couple of porta potties downstairs, vendor, existing retailers are still getting a lot of traffic looking for porta potties, looking for bathrooms. Particularly the stone mill was mentioned, that's someone that gets a lot of traffic, so that. Also, of Verizon, later in that 123 Wi-Fi for 24 Park, Merchants Road area, for Bedfordson Park and others visiting the area. I have had some preliminary conversations with St. Stephen's Church about hosting that. They've been receptive to that, so we'll find back that soon. Cell phone charger, battery station again for visitors and tourists, and improved wayfinding and parking signs for the downtown. It's also something that
We spent a bunch of money on putting Wayfair parking signs 2 years ago. And this continuation of it or replacing those?
this, the concept is more looking into what it might look like to have a business directory, something that we can check like you get at a mall. This is the map of the downtown and you can slide in new vendors, new retailers.
As public signage, not as the
Yeah.
little green maps.
Right.
Get the red card. They have that sign.
But that's something we're just starting to look into.
Question, again, newbie here. Who is the downtown improvement district commission?
Who's on it?
Yeah, how is it set?
It's set up by ordinance.
Okay.
Minutes are in your packet, but we have Amy Ryan, who's the chair,
Okay,
Lorraine Tobias, Stacey Graney, Franco, and Bill, Gary Baker, and Dan Brown.
do we approve, but these are appointed?
These are appointed by the
appointed.
select board, but there's specific groups that these people have to represent.
Okay,
And there's a district
yes,
that's,
right.
that gets the additional
No.
taxes.
Yeah,
For some reason, the Swift House was the last one on the end of the line down there.
yeah,
So we had to have Dan.
Yeah.
nice.
And I listen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't make downtown.
They have a website, if you go to government and you go to commissions, go to downtown improvement, you can see who's on it, their packets are there. You just have to remember like what type of.
Pleasure of the board.
I'll move to approve and FY 23 downtown improvement district budget for $33,233.
Seconded, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed. I would like to thank the businesses that contribute to that. I know they don't necessarily have a choice, but they've done some very meaningful projects that have made a difference in the downtown. And so I think they should be recognized for, it's investments in their business. It's one way to look at it, but it also really is helpful for the downtown. That's why that was created some years ago. Okay, Wayne's gonna lead us through on tax rate.
So the town meeting approved a budget of $7,881,060 at the March town meeting. And then also approved the appropriation of $750 for Addison Allies Network. So we are raising a total of $7,881,813, which is divided by our total municipal grant list of $9.8 million to come up with 84.24 cents as a calculated tax rate. We also pay for veterans exemptions from municipal taxes there's a statewide exemption of $10,000, but the town also voted to increase that amount to $40,000, so we pay that amount on behalf of our veterans. But they're a small amount on the tax rate, like 12 cents. So your total municipal tax rate is 38 cents at the fire fund, or 2 cents on the tax rate. You come with 8 to 3 cents, 36 cents for your municipal tax rate.
Questions on that? Done by formula approach, it's not anything really, we've already approved the budget. Now we've got everything we need to approve the tax rate so they can get the bills out. I would ask for a motion then to establish that tax rate.
That's the first motion, right?
The first one.
I'll move to set the municipal tax rate for FY 23 at 82.36 cents for $100 of the property value.
Second. Everybody understand what we're doing? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
And do the same thing with the downtown district budget that you, select board just approved. Coming up with a 5.12 cents, which is a slight reduction from 5.17 last year.
Any questions on that?
Is the downtown district do these amazing hang baskets? Gentlemen, yeah, there. Yeah.
Okay, pleasure to board on item number 2.
I'll move to set the downtown improvement district tax rate for FY 23 at 5.12 cents for $100 of property value.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The good news is that I believe our education tax rate went down a little bit, so our tax rate will continue to be steady. So, we've got a pretty good run.
And for those of us that are still watching, we'll get these tax rates to the printer and have the tax bills in the mail on Friday. So you'll be getting them early next week. And we have a lot of people that are very eager for their tax bills, and we thank them for them being so conscientious. And the first installment is due August 15th.
I can't wait to see all that. So the board's being asked to approve a declaration of intent stating that the town will use bond proceeds to reimburse itself for the expense associated with the realignment of the 4th Street Charles Monroe intersection. The declaration commits the town to complete such reimbursement within 18 months of either the date of the first expenditure of funds or the date that the project is placed in service, whichever is later. The town may also reimburse itself for expenses incurred up to 60 days before adoption of the resolution, including VHB's preliminary design work for the intersection. Town clerk will be the one to sign it, so we will be doing that. And authorizing town clerk and Webster's signature. For those of you who are watching still, the board has entered a purchase and sale agreement to purchase the old Maverick gas station site. We have been working for some years on the possibility to redesign that intersection, which is one of, according to the traffic analyst, is the significant impediment to smooth flow of traffic through on 4th Street. And so we're trying to fix that snag. And this intent to bond is something we bring it to you queued up for discussion at a later date. Any questions on that? No, pleasure of the board.
I move to approve the declaration of intent to bond for expenses associated with the realignment of Port Charles Road intersection and authorize town clerk and officers.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Next, it's Monday, July 5th, 2022, Town Treasurer Jackie Sullivan asked Town Manager Captain Ramsey to tender her resignation as Middlebury elected Town Treasurer to the Middlebury Selectboard, effective upon appointment of a successor. The board is being requested to officially accept Jackie's resignation. For the 24 VSA Section 127B describes the prescribed process for appointing an interim treasurer to fill the position until town meeting in 2023. And a draft notice of the vacancy will be published in the Addison Independent on Thursday, July 14th, 2022. Applications are due by Monday, July 25th, 2022. Nominations will be made by the Select Board on Tuesday, July 26th, 2022. Appointments will be made on Tuesday, August 9th, 2022. I'm sure Jackie's gone to bed by now, but Jackie, thank you for all the years that you've toiled for the town of Middlebury, and certainly wish you well. Conditions that have led Jackie to resign her position are not of her choosing, obviously, and so we send our prayers and thoughts your way. And we'll have to pick up the pieces and move on. That I would entertain a motion.
I'll move to accept the resignation of Town Treasurer Jackie Sullivan, effective upon appointment of a successor.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Have we considered non-elected?
We're moving that way. Down. We've all talked about it in the past. But because we had an incumbent who's continuing to serve.
Yeah.
Left it, but we feel it should be an appointed position, and we're going to take that to the voters for charge. So we're looking for an interim, and then we're looking for a charge. We have to also take the bond vote. I think we're looking to do those two things during the general election cycle, I believe. Okay.
Yeah.
Esther, you have check.
So I move to approve total expenditures in the amount of $1,7,942.23, consisting of $884,170.47 for accounts payable and $123,771.76 for payroll for the period of June 29th, 2022 through July 12th, 2022.
Seconded, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, board member concerns for hot.
Well, since the meeting lasted until almost 10 now, today is my 30th anniversary.
Oh,
I'm just ready to get.
I'm surprised you showed up.
I missed last meeting.
Well, because you usually fall quickly, I know.
So, yeah, that's fine. But, yeah, I have a-
so I would just echo what Andy said already about the hanging baskets. I came downtown with my daughter on Saturday. We wanted to go to the library and the peasant market, and we ended up going into the bookstore and getting our Where's Waldo passport, which it has been a few years since Where's Waldo's been going on. And I just think it is absolutely the best thing in Middlebury. It is so fun to walk around the stores looking for Waldo. And we thought, oh, we'll just go to a couple and then we'll come back. We ended up doing 10, finding 10 Waldos. And in every store, I think, just about found something to purchase because I had to walk around and look at everything. Yeah, and it was just fabulous because I go in these stores that I'm not regularly going in, seeing what they have, and I just think it's a great program. So kudos to Becky and the Vermont Bookshop for hosting that, and the other businesses that have Waldo up. They were all super excited to see us in there searching and were helpful. And if you haven't done it, I highly recommend it. So, just had to share.
At this point, can I add something?
No.
About my comments? So two of my sisters are here from India. When they got married a couple years ago, so they came to visit my older sister and my third sister. So I brought them downtown, and my older sister was almost 7 years old. So I took her to the Lazarus Park, and she walked through the labyrinth, took a video of it was so cute. She'd never seen anything like this. And they complimented every single flower basket that's hanging. And they're asking me, how do you water those things?
Becca asked me the same question. She said, how do they water those? And I said, I think they have some kind of wand.
All along, water
Hole
tank
and
on the back.
They really, like, you don't really appreciate them until you were walking on the sidewalk. I mean, they're huge, they're amazing anyway. So, everyone involved, just great job. It's a lot of fun.
I'm excited, I'm gonna go to Where's Waldo.
You should definitely do it.
And I have nothing.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to say a few things. One, thank you. Just thank you. Thank you for all the work that you do, and the way you presented it, that was so clear. And so thank you for your work. And Camp Cucamonga, I gotta give kudos to Dustin and Amber. My kid is having a ball. My kid is an introvert. Amber gives Lawrence a hug every time. But Lawrence is not the introvert, he's the extrovert. But anywho, it's just a welcoming community, and the kids are having a ball, and just so proud to send my kids there. And when I pick them up, they're so tired. So that is the point. That is the point you go to camp. Come home tired. So it's been great. And
So, I'm sorry to interrupt, Andy, but my daughter's 12 in her last year of official Camp Cucamonga camper, and she's been going since whatever. Anyway, she loves it too, and it's just a fact, we are so lucky to have such a great resource like that in Denver. So definitely kudos to Dustin and Scott.
yes.
Well said. Or, sorry, I'm so tired.
Yes, so wait.
So when I travel, I've got a little bit of an eye for municipal services and the like. One thing about Rome, which is amazing, and I think of as we look at Merlets, is that there are running fountains all over this historic downtown, running all the time. You put your finger on it, and there's a little spit of a hole. They're called elephant trunks, I think. And you stop the flow at the bottom, and you get a little spray out that you can drink off of. It's lovely. You don't need to always be carrying a water bottle and paying money for it. And I just think as we provide toilets, that this is a thing which has been lost in America in the last 30 years of my life, is having water fountains. Then when we were in Corsica, they had a lot of road work going on, and it would be one guy with 2 coordinated little stop signs that he'd set up, and he was just doing work, fixing things. Like, God, I can't imagine this with less than 4 people in the States. And it's impressive to see the efficiency. They would be there for 2 hours and then gone, and they've done their thing. It's great, and this cappuccino is delicious. And the complimentary traffic in Paris, the quality of the bike and scooter lanes, how much they're used is wonderful, and it really, I just get sad thinking that, because of our tough winters, we can't have this lovely separation between the traffic and the motorized vehicles and the non-motorized vehicles, and have so much use of this great resource year round. And it's too bad.
You know, one thing with technologies with being in Italy and Rome, we have Zoom. You could have zoomed into the select board meeting.
It started at
Instead of getting me sucked in.
3 a.m. Yeah.
I had a phone
could've-
call with her at 11 o'clock at night over there, and
Yeah.
I said, okay.
Okay, I'm not as dedicated as Dan. I'll take that.
I do not have anything. I'd like to go home.
I do have a question. Where John, do I buy a headset for a computer now?
Actually, did you get, they all have it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The gas station.
Gas station down,
Everybody got it. Last time it flew.
Yeah, really.
yeah. It's really dope. So,
We have to know
Those
what.
never work, they work
We have no
once.
executive session, right?
Yes,
We never heard back, right?
thank you for suggesting that we not have the executive session.
Yeah, Andy was an overachiever, he wanted to have a executive session.
I wanted to know more about the electrical generation history at
oh, geez.
our recent communications center.
That's a long, that's a long.
Anyway,
I'm still learning about that one.
Not this
Nobody
week.
talks about that.
Hey, thanks for all of your patience and engagement on these, thorny, important issues.
You're not used to being here till 10.
I know, we got spoiled.
We got spoiled for a while.
So nice.
I thought a motion to adjourn and then I can.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Yes, please.
Aye. Okay, then, 9:55.
You say that now.
You need a ride?
I've got a ride.
You go?
Yeah.
Well, because you have to go so, you don't want to walk down that street.
I love to walk down the street, but I wanted to have a little time to finish reviewing some things. And it's hard to read and walk.
You go your street, you want to walk.
I would really love if we could figure out a way that our things are like text to voice. I tried it in the beginning, but I would like
For which?
to convert our package to audio.
Oh, so you can
I'm
listen
trying
to
to
it.
figure it out, like I almost got grabbing dictate at one point.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I was like, I don't know if it's gonna work.
None of those work as well as you want.
Right, well, that was the thing.
It's sleeping enough reading this stuff. You may as well listen.